Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan Lugo. Thanks so much for tuning in here on December 26th, Boxing Day. If you celebrate, hopefully the Jaguars did not ruin your Christmas too much. We're able to spend some good time with family and friends. I know I was, but we are going to try to improve what the Jaguars have going on here today with a 4-round mock draft. We have done one 3-round mock draft so far. Now we're getting into a 4-round mock draft. Yes, the Jaguars, they're technically still on top of their division, tied for first place in the AFC South. They have the tiebreaker. If they're able to sneak into the playoffs, beating the Carolina Panthers this upcoming weekend in Jacksonville, then taking care of business against the Titans, anything can happen, right? If you get into the dance, anything can happen. But there's no question about the fact that the Jaguars do lack talent in certain areas, in my opinion. I think they lack physicality and toughness in certain areas. And we're going to do our best to change that in this here mock draft. Maybe give you all a little bit of a late Christmas present to help you, think about a brighter future here in Jacksonville. And again, this is a roster that has a lot of talent in certain areas. If you're talking about Trevor Lawrence not being the quarterback, that's absolutely not the case. He is your franchise quarterback. He is tough as they come. He is a supremely talented football player who's kind of trying to work through a lot of injuries right now, trying to work through some not so great situations going on both sides of the ball for the Jaguars. But look, we're going to try to get tougher here. I ran this mock draft over at NFLmockdraftdatabase.com. I love their user experience over there. If you haven't checked it out, you should go check it out if you enjoy mock drafts. And look, we're going to be changing things up on almost every mock draft here on the channel because the point of mock drafts, running a bunch of mock drafts, is really to see all the different things that can happen, right? And for me, this is going to be a mock draft that it's based on what I would do if I was calling the shots. It's not going to feel like a Trent Baalke mock draft, and hopefully that's a welcome sight for y'all. And hopefully after this blundered offseason and in-season management of this roster, there will be someone else calling the shots for the Jaguars from a personnel standpoint in 2024. I think that Trent Baalke and this front office and this entire organization whiffed in a big way by standing pat throughout the offseason. The only move they made to improve the roster really was getting Calvin Ridley, and obviously that's been a mixed bag so far. Love the player, love the guy, but it has been a mixed bag, and his attempt to come back to football after missing almost 2 years. So yeah, we've got 4 rounds for you here. Excited to dive into it. I don't think that the Jaguars are going to sign Calvin Ridley and therefore give up a second rounder. If anything, I think you tag him and then bring him back that way, giving up a 3rd-round pick. At least that's how I have it projected out here. So we've got one of the Jaguars' 2 3rd-round picks heading to Atlanta, but that still gives us 4 picks to work with here in this mock draft that it again was run over on NFLmockdraftdatabase.com. And without further ado, at 22 overall, where the Jaguars currently stand, Keon Coleman fell all the way down to 22. Now, will Coleman be available? I think that's a really interesting question. I do believe that obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the first receiver off the board. I also think Malik Neighbors should be the second receiver off the board. His ability to separate and create big plays is just unmatched, in my opinion, outside of a Marvin Harrison Jr. And then you look at Rome Odunze out of Washington. I think that he's probably going to be wide receiver 3 because he will simply test out of his mind. This offseason, he had a great year for Washington, still continuing that year into the playoffs, right? He's a special talent. I do think that he and Keon Coleman are in a similar range for me in terms of where they project in the draft. But when you talk about 3 wide receivers coming off the board, is a 4th receiver going to come off the board before pick 22? When there is talent at a lot of other spots in this class. Quarterbacks are going to come off the board early. At least 3 of them, in my opinion, will go before this spot, maybe 4. I think that you're going to see offensive tackles come off the board early. I think you're going to see some corners come off the board early. So it is possible here. And again, we're talking about possibilities. It is possible that Keon Coleman falls to 22. And if he does, I think the Jaguars should sprint to the podium. Because I know some people talk about he doesn't separate at a really high level. And I think that that's a fair critique. But I think it's also fair to say this is a 20-year-old receiver who is 6'4", 220 pounds, has incredible hands, maybe the best hands in the entire class, has natural twitchiness to him, has underrated overall athleticism and speed, in my opinion. This is a guy that is rumored to be able to run in the 4.4s, if not low 4.5s. And again, at that size, 6'4", 220, you love to see that. a guy that was FSU's punt returner. And the reason he's the punt returner is because he has natural twitch. He has the ability to make people miss in space at that size, which is rare. I think he is a rare overall blend of size and overall athleticism. And I think he's a guy that is tough. He's going to block his ass off for you out in space. He's going to go get the football. He's going to go get contested catches. He's going to make people miss in space. And he's just going to add an overall level of physicality and toughness to your wide receiver room that you do not currently have. And I think he's the type of guy that could be a wide receiver one, the type of guy that Trevor Lawrence has had success with in the past. When you're talking about T. Higgins, I think that's a fair comp for Keon Coleman. I think he might even be a little twitchier than T. Higgins, right? I think you talk about these big-bodied receivers that kind of dominate at the NFL level. Keon Coleman has a real chance to be that. And you talk about, well, he's not a good separator. He's not a great route runner. He's 20 years old. He has the potential to really improve in that regard and his craft, right, as a route runner. I don't think it's because he has no flexibility that he's too stiff. I don't think that's at all the problem with Keon Coleman. I think he's just going to need to grow as a route runner throughout his career. And again, at only 20 years old, I think there's massive growth potential for Keon Coleman from a technical standpoint. I think what you're getting right now is a guy who has just size and speed and athleticism that you can't coach and tremendous hands. So I think Keon Coleman, if the Jaguars were able to land him at 22 overall, if that is indeed where they end up picking, would be a home run pick. You got to go get a receiver that Trevor Lawrence can feel he can just throw the football up to and that he's going to come down with it more often than not. And I know you look at his contested catch rate in 2023 wasn't all that impressive, but you got kind of a lollipop arm back there with Jordan Travis. No offense, he's a great college quarterback, had a tremendous career at Florida State after transferring from Louisville. But if you're talking about Trevor Lawrence throwing these balls to Keon Coleman versus Jordan Travis, it's not much of a comparison. And I think you saw his ability to win contested catch situations at times in 2023, but especially if you go back and look at what he did at Michigan State, it's all over the tape. So Keon Coleman for me would be a home run for the Jaguars at 22 overall. You're improving your toughness, your physicality, but also your playmaking and your receiver core for Trevor Lawrence, which is critical. Then in the second round, 53 overall, you've got Jackson Powers Johnson still on the board here. I think that this would be another home run type of pick. The Jaguars desperately need to upgrade what they have at center. Luke Fortner is not getting the job done. I think you bring in a guy like Jackson Powers Johnson, and we've talked about some other center prospects, right? You know, Graham Barton, the offensive tackle from Duke. You talk about Zach Frazier, Cedric Van Pran. There's some good interior offensive line and center prospects in this class, but I think Jackson Powers Johnson, talking about what he would bring to the Jaguars, tremendous from a technical standpoint, tremendous from a football IQ standpoint. He is always in the right place at the right time, always framing up his blocks. He's not an elite athlete, but he is a functional athlete, has the ability to work to the second level, do a lot of different things for you up front. He's going to be more stout as a run blocker than Luke Fortner is, and I think he's going to hold up in pass protection very well. Very smart football player, and a guy that I think would be a welcome addition to the interior of the offensive line and really would be able to beat out Luke Fortner for the starting job from day one. I think he certainly would be able to do that. Then I think, you know, you're talking about continuing to upgrade that interior offensive line because, yeah, Luke Fortner, you've got to fix that position at center. But you look at left guard, that's kind of been a revolving door all year. You don't know what's going to happen there. I mean, sure, could Ezra Cleveland be your starter next year? Yes, but he's not under contract next year. You talk about what are you doing at offensive tackle? Not sure. Will Cam Robinson be back? Will Walker Little again be kind of one of those guys where you're just trying to plug him in and get your 5 best offensive linemen on the field? I know he's been battling through injury, not playing his best lately. So I think it's going to be a position where the Jaguars really do want to upgrade and add some talent to multiple spots along the interior. Obviously, Brandon Sheriff, an aging veteran who has not played his best ball for the Jaguars, still a very good pass protector overall, but hasn't really created the same push in the run game that you were expected or used to seeing when he was over with Washington. So maybe you decide to get younger. I think if Christian Haynes out of UConn is on the board for you at 96 overall, or whichever pick you have in the third round. Obviously, again, as I mentioned, one of those picks is going to Atlanta. But if Christian Haynes is available for you, this is an absolute people mover. He is nasty. He is violent. He is a good overall athlete. I think you see the ability to get to the second level, to pull, to do a lot of different things for your offensive line, to impact multiple defenders on one play. I think that he's been absolutely dominant at UConn. I thought he should have been in the draft last year. I did a full scouting report for him last year. But Christian Haynes, this is a guy that, again, we're talking about upgrading toughness, upgrading physicality, violence on this Jaguars roster. Christian Haynes does that in a big way, and you pair him with Jackson Powers Johnson. I think if your interior three was Christian Haynes, Jackson Powers Johnson, and Brandon Sheriff next year, if you decide to keep Sheriff in his big contract, that could be tremendous. I think that could be a huge upgrade, and I think that Sheriff playing alongside two better interior offensive linemen than he's been working with the last couple years could help rejuvenate his game as well, right? So I think Christian Haynes would be awesome for the Jaguars in the third round, and a guy that, again, would probably be able to come in and start immediately. Obviously, would you like to go add somebody in free agency potentially to help out the interior of the offensive line? Yeah, but we don't have that information available to us right now. We're just talking about a mock draft that does not really take into account what the Jaguars end up doing in free agency, right? So you've got your star wide receiver in Keon Coleman, who brings physicality, toughness, athleticism to the table. Jackson Powers Johnson, your new starting center. Christian Haynes, another starter on the interior of the offensive line. And then now we're going to get a little bit tougher, get a little bit more of a hot motor on the interior of the defensive line. And that's Braden Fisk out of FSU, transferred there from Western Michigan this year. You can just see it on tape. He wants it more than the guy across from him almost every play. He is explosive off the ball. He is tough, has a nice swim move, good little pass rush repertoire, good power profile. I think that he can play with leverage. Does not have great length, does not have great bend overall, but that's why you can get him here in the fourth round. At this point in the draft, I think that he will be a either late day 2 pick or early day 3 pick, and that's where the Jaguars land him right here. I think he's an immediate rotational guy for them that can plug in at multiple spots, can help you against the run, can help you as a pass rusher and interior penetrator, and develop into a good starter despite the fact that he doesn't have great overall length. So I think Braden Fisk would just be awesome as a guy that can come in and add some physicality. Again, add that hot motor, a guy who is always pushing to beat the guy across from him, and you can really see that on his tape. So I think you've added 4 players here with this 4-round mock draft that bring toughness, that also brings skill, and a team that desperately needs to get tougher and more skillful in the trenches. And at wide receiver, you do that with all these picks. You get bigger and more athletic with Keon Coleman, stronger and more aggressive on the interior of the offensive line with Jackson Powers Johnson and Christian Haynes, and then on the interior of the defensive line with Braden Fisk. If the Jaguars were able to land these 4 players in the first 4 rounds of the draft, I think it would be an absolute coup for them. I really appreciate y'all tuning in. Would love to know what you think about this mock draft. You can hit me up on Twitter at Jordan DeLugo. You can also drop a comment in the comment section below. If you enjoy the content, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. You can also go check out genjag.com/shop, pick up some new Duval gear. Y'all have a good one.